All right, welcome back to Capitol Tonight. Several groups have already offered suggestions for how the state should spend the multi-billion-dollar surplus that came from massive bank settlements. The Rebuild New York Coalition is asking lawmakers to spend the money on infrastructure projects, and they are also making the case to voters and a new campaign ad. Let's take a look.
New York has an infrastructure crisis, so investing to create jobs and improve road safety is an easy call. For every $1 billion spent on infrastructure, more than 28,000 jobs are created. Poor roads cost.
All right, and here to talk more about that is the president of the Associated General Contractors, Mike Elmendorf, and I meant to say ad campaign, not campaign ad, but
no, the same difference.
Same
right?
difference,
yeah.
But you're trying to kind of move the ball forward here on getting this surplus money to be spent on infrastructure projects, and it's something that has come up repeatedly as we've got this now 3.6 billion some odd surplus. Where is the greatest need for these projects?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think first of all, this just makes sense for two reasons. New York and really America have an infrastructure crisis. I mean, in New York State, nearly a third of our bridges are either structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. About half of our major roads are in poor condition. Every day, about 17 million New Yorkers drive over a bridge that, to some degree, is in a state of disrepair. And this is the result of decades of underinvestment in infrastructure, both by Washington, largely. Washington looms large in this because a lot of this money comes from Washington, but in Albany too. And this is not something that the current administration created. They inherited it to a large degree, but it's a crisis. I mean, think about it this way. We have thousands of bridges in New York that were built about 50 years ago for 60 years ago for a 50-year lifespan. So this needs to be done. These are not optional things. And when you're in the unique situation that we're in now, where you've got billions of dollars, and you use 3 point something, I've heard up to $6 billion. Nobody even knows how much money there is.
We're also getting more money rolling in from the latest one.
There's a lot of found money. Yeah. This just makes sense. There's a lot of other organizations and interest groups out there saying, how about us? You should spend the money on education. You should spend it on tax cuts. You should spend it on any number of things. And all of these are worthy and important areas, but there's one problem. Every one of those things virtually creates an out-year obligation in the state budget. As near as I can tell, this Brinks truck is not pulling up to the Capitol again next year with all these billions of dollars. So that being the case, investing in infrastructure, making a one-time, long-term capital investment, just makes good sense for the taxpayers, it makes sense for our economy, and it makes sense for the safety of the public.
Okay, let's unpack some of this because there's a lot going on here. I mean, first of all, you've got Governor Cuomo, who has said that he wants to spend this money on infrastructure projects, but he has also acknowledged that, as you said, that there are other folks out there who would like to see this money spent on education, and he said that he wants to see targeted education investment. He would also like to see some money spent on trying to get local governments to consolidate and share services in order to get property taxes under control on the local level. How much of this money, what percentage would your group like to see spent on infrastructure? Would it 100%,
yeah,
50%?
Frankly, we think it should all be spent on infrastructure, and here's why. Not only because, again, if you invest it in other areas that create out your obligations, next year you just have a hole in the budget. Because if you spend $1 on something this year in Albany, you've been around, Nick, next year the question is, we're going to get $1 plus what in the budget, right? So doing something that creates an ongoing obligation is just bad fiscal policy. And there's been broad agreement on that across the political spectrum. I mean, one of the most stunning things I saw was an article that was co-authored by my good friend E.J. McMahon, who is one of the brightest conservative thinkers in the state, and Richard Brodsky, who is one of the brightest, more liberal thinkers in the state, agreeing that you should spend this money in infrastructure. When those two guys get together on something like this, you know one of two things. Either they're onto something or we're pretty near the end of times, right? So, there is broad agreement that infrastructure is the smartest investment. And to be clear, whether it's $3 billion or $6 billion, even if the whole thing gets invested in infrastructure and funding a multi-year capital program, that's a small down payment on the needs. Comptroller DiNapoli says over the next 20 years, you've got about $175 billion in just transportation infrastructure needs. That's, I'm not great at math, but $8 or so billion a year, which dwarfs the resources that are out there now, and frankly dwarfs even these settlement dollars.
So are we talking about roads, bridges, tunnels, where's the need here? And also, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, well, why not just spend all of this money on building a new Tappan Zee Bridge? You know, that's funding that project has proven to be a challenge, I think it's fair to say, and there may be system-wide toll hikes as a result of something like that. I'm sure a number of your members would not be in favor of something like that. Why not spend all of this money on the Tappan Zee Bridge?
Well, a couple things. All of our infrastructure has needs. I mean, the present conversation is largely driven by the fact that in this next budget cycle, the Department of Transportation is due to come up with a new multi-year capital program.
Yeah.
The MTA is engaged in a similar process. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the Thruway. So, you know, there's the current calendar drives a lot of conversation about transportation infrastructure, but the SUNY system has tremendous infrastructure needs, much like our bridges. Their system is older, it has a lot of needs, just like our transportation infrastructure. It too is an important economic driver. Now, the Tappan Zee Bridge. Tappan Zee Bridge is a very important project. I was with Brian Conybeare this morning, who was updating us on it, but it's not the only project in the state, and there are needs all along the Thruway, there are needs all along our transportation infrastructure. The capital plan can't be one project. They're going to figure out how to pay for that, and we're watching closely to see how that impacts the ability of the rest of the Thruway to maintain its infrastructure, because it too is at that age where you have to start making major repairs, if not replacing things. They've got many bridges and a lot of pavement in their system, and it's starting to deteriorate, frankly, because they haven't had the resources. Now, they're different because they're driven by toll revenues. That's how they get very little money from elsewhere.
You feel like the Tappan Zee is going on kind of a parallel track.
You know, I won't be surprised if the governor's talking about an infrastructure bank, which is a concept that we support, and if that happens, I think that could very well play a role in the ultimate financial plan for the Tappan Zee. But there are thousands of miles of road and thousands of bridges around the state that are in poor condition. They're going to be in worse condition after this winter if what we've seen so far in November is any indication of what's going to be going on around the state.
Especially for folks in Buffalo.
Especially for folks in Buffalo, when they can find the roads and bridges again once they dig out.
Right.
So this is a statewide problem. It can't be about one project. It's about highway and roads and bridges and transit and the needs of the whole system. And it's an opportunity because, frankly, the need is clear. We're at a point where the state and, frankly, Washington need to make some tough decisions. And in Albany, at least, we are in the enviable position that there's a big pile of found money, which I don't recall when that has last happened in the years that I've been kicking around here.
Well, let's talk about this ad campaign that's going on right now. I mean, just what is the strategy of getting something like this out, I guess, early, a few weeks after Election Day? Is it just trying to get it into the public consciousness, get into the consciousness of newly elected state lawmakers?
All of the above. I think if you look at sort of where the public is, there's a focus on the condition of infrastructure and the needs of infrastructure on a sustained basis that I really have not seen before. But if you look at the list of issues that are out there, it's not as high as it should be, because people say, well, I'm concerned about infrastructure, but I'm more concerned about the economy, I'm more concerned about jobs, education, healthcare, all very important things. Here's the thing. You can't do any of those things. None of them work if you don't have good, safe, reliable infrastructure. You can't, it's one more reason why companies and jobs won't locate in New York if your infrastructure is in poor shape. You can't get your kids to school safely if the infrastructure is in poor shape. You can't get grandma to the hospital when there's a medical emergency if the road or the bridge are closed and the ambulance has to take a detour. So all the things that people may think at the onset are more important than infrastructure, none of them work unless you have good, reliable infrastructure. So it's about educating the public, making those linkages, which are very real, certainly about educating lawmakers, and, frankly, driving up the importance of the issue, because right now budget decisions are starting to be made. The governor and his team, fresh off re-election, hopefully they got a little chance to catch their breath, are right now, I can tell you, working on the executive budget. And, to a large degree, the table on this issue is going to be set in that executive budget, because we're talking about billions of dollars. And there's broad support. You talked about the governor talking about this. Senator Skelos just yesterday talked about the need to invest in infrastructure. The Assembly majority have been strong supporters of the need to invest in infrastructure. This is an issue that sort of transcends politics, which is a nice thing to see. But the trick always is, how do you pay for it? And again, with these settlement dollars, with these surplus dollars, we have a real unique opportunity to make a long-term investment in infrastructure that will support our economy and support our communities and keep the public safe.
All right, something to watch for. Mike Elmendorf of the Associated General Contractors.